introduce your moderator this evening, our Governmental Affairs Committee Chairman, Dr. Eugene.
Good evening. Is that on? Okay. I will read, talking to the candidates. Now, I will read each question, and it is directed to a specific candidate. He or she will answer. If it's directed to any candidate, all of you may answer, and to indicate your desire to do so, raise your hand. Remember, your responses are limited to 2 minutes. Our timers are in the back. And they will signal you when you're getting close to the 2-minute limitation. Okay, so I'm just going to start at this end and work that way. So the first one is for John, and it's a little bit lengthy, but I'll read it rapidly if I can. I have heard that you speak to the pollution caused by coal, that a coal-fired power plant produces 60 pounds of mercury a year, and that is 2.7 ounces a day distributed daily over a large area, not concentrated in a single location. My question is, if you're looking out for the middle class and poor child in a grossly populated area, have you given any thought to the inflation it will cause to manufacturing, food producing, and energy costs, and loss of job and disposable income to these families? We have the cleanest burning coal-fired power plants in the world, yet Green Vision doesn't seem to see that due to the cost increases in manufacturing in our company, manufacturing has failed to places like China, who burn higher sulfur and coal with little pollution controls. Can you see that you're hurting not only America but the world?
Thank you very much for the question, whoever wrote it, and thank you for presenting it to me. The facts are very, very, very clear. Coal-fired power plants are a very, very serious problem. In the pollution that they emit into the surrounding area, in the fly ash that is then produced, we've had numerous problems over the years. What is actually happening is a new infrastructure is being built. We in America are actually shutting down the old coal-fired power plants, in part because of the emissions and the regulations that prohibit the continuation of poisoning our children with arsenic and mercury. It doesn't take much mercury to cause a real serious problem in young children, and in the other kinds of pollution, including carbon dioxide. So what are we going to do? What we're doing is we're repowering those power plants using natural gas, which is now in plentiful supply. In fact, today natural gas dropped below $2,000 a 1,000 cubic feet. $2 for 1,000 cubic feet of natural gas. The lowest it's been in the last 2 decades. Why? Because we're very, very successful in the United States in developing our natural gas industry, using, as I said earlier, technology that was actually developed by the U.S. government, the U.S. Geological Survey, called fracking. We're seeing that happen. It is an enormous strategic asset for America. And as we repower these power plants, we reduce the carbon dioxide by nearly 2/3. We reduce and we almost totally eliminate all of the other contaminants, arsenic and mercury and the like. However, understand this. The natural gas producers, that is the industry itself, is now in the process of trying to export natural gas. 10 years ago we were talking about importing. Now they're talking about exporting. Why? So that they can enjoy the world's price, which is 4 to 5 times higher than the United States. We cannot let that happen.
I think they changed the channel.
Something happened. Okay, so this would be for Eugene.
Yes, sir.
My wife and I lived in Dixon. We were both school teachers. In 2010, we paid 13% of our income in federal taxes. 2010, Mitt Romney made $21 million. He paid the same 13% in federal taxes. Do you feel this is fair? If yes, why? If no, what's the solution?
How much did Ronnie make again? How much money did he make?
Oh, I don't know, 21 million.
$200 million.
More or
So
less.
he paid what? He paid over $2 million in taxes?
13%.
Right, 13%, so he paid over $2 million. That's a lot of money in taxes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the next one is President Obama has proposed reducing our nuclear arsenal by 80%, leaving the U.S. with about 300 warheads, about the same as Pakistan. He also has proposed a major cut in missile defense efforts. Do you agree with those proposals?
Okay, this is another one that I will enjoy answering because it's kind of in my wheelhouse. We heard President Obama explain to President Medvedev that after the election I'll have more flexibility to discuss missile defense. I don't really know what he meant by that. But I guarantee you if he is negotiating in the best interest of the American people, he would win support by negotiating now and not waiting till after the election. Nuclear weapons is a horror. It is something that some of us grew up with and knew what would happen if we released them. That whole mutual assured destruction strategy that really worked through the Cold War, you know, labeled MAD for a reason. I don't want to see a nuclear war future for my country. I've raised my hand to give my life for this country if necessary. Don't want to do that. I like what Patton says, make the other guy give his life for his country, right? But unilateral, de-arming, doing it, leading the way, and opening up America to greater risk when you have rogue nations like North Korea and Iran developing nuclear weapons, this is not the time to be weak. It never is the time to be weak. But especially now, we need to be strong. Oh, I like the idea of less nuclear weapons in our future. Do it in a way that still protects America, with guaranteed reductions across the board everywhere. Make sure this missile defense system that everybody made fun of Ronald Reagan as Star Wars, this stuff works. I deliver some of these missiles in my C-17. This stuff works. If North Korea launched something at us, we have a good chance of defending ourselves against it, a really good chance of not having that nuclear bomb drop on us. If Iran follows through with their idea of wiping Israel off the face of the earth, we've given or worked with Israel to give them a missile defense shield to protect them. It is the right way to go forward in implementing that kind of stuff and not reducing it. Thank you.
Question? Can I respond to that question also?
When your turn comes around, you can bring something up, yeah. Kim, you speak of deregulation often. Will you give us 2 examples of regulations you would do away with and the reasons why they were regulated in the first place?
2 regulations I would do away with. Well, I think a broad brush stroke on that one, first off, would be we need to take a break from introducing additional regulations. 10,000 new rulemaking procedures came out in the last 2 years alone. So it's not just 1 or 2 individual ones that need to be immediately repealed. We need to take a break, get the economy back on track. We live in one of the cleanest, safest countries in the world, so we need to look at it as a whole. But let's look at one from the Environmental Protection Agency in particular. NEPA and the Clean Water Act regulates bodies of water in the U.S. There's a word in that regulation. It's called navigable. That gives definition to streams, rivers, creeks, drainage ditches, any body of water that's flowing that is considered navigable by the U.S., by EPA. They want to remove, the administration and the Department of Interior want to remove the word navigable from this definition of Clean Water Act. That means that all bodies of water would be regulated under certain provisions of the Clean Water Act, and federal permits would be required to do any type of project or work in these bodies where water isn't even flowing at times. Now, I don't want dirty water any more than the next person, and I don't want to ruin our environment. But taking a break and pulling back and not going so far in one direction without considering the economic impacts to what we're doing to this country is unacceptable.
Let's ask this question to everyone, starting with John. If Iran or North Korea develop nuclear capabilities, are you going to invade? If not, what will you do?
North Korea does have nuclear weapon capability. There's a question whether they can deliver those weapons in a missile, and that's now in process of being determined. We have to continue pressure on both Iran and on North Korea using diplomacy and using sanctions. Both of those have the potential to work. An invasion of North Korea is a real serious step, and we ought not take that. With regard to Iran, it doesn't make sense at this time to do anything to bomb Iran and to try to stop that, because it would simply drive them further underground and make them even stronger committed to developing the weapon. To go back to a couple of issues that were mentioned, the President has not at all suggested 300 nuclear weapons. That simply is not the case. There are continuing negotiations that will go on into the years ahead dealing with nuclear weapons. We've had success all the way back to John Kennedy about reducing nuclear weapons, and that's in all of our interest. We need to be very cautious about this. I happen to be on the subcommittee of the House Armed Services Committee that deals with nuclear weapons. And I'm telling you, there is no proposal to go to 300 nuclear weapons by anybody in the administration. With regard to regulations, let me give you two examples of what we can do to reduce regulations. First of all, a bill that became law just last Wednesday, the President signed it into law, called the Jobs Act, reduces the regulations on companies, small companies that want to go public. Great idea. I voted for it. Actually, was part of the team that put together that legislation to reduce the regulations so that small companies can go public. And finally, the EPA did propose that dust from agriculture be regulated. I voted for a bill that said, no, you're not going to regulate dust from agriculture. So there are things that we can do to reduce regulations, and with regard to nuclear weapons and Iran and North Korea, move cautiously, move strongly, but continue the movement as we are now doing.
Well, that's a fine line. Sanctions, as I recall, I mean, just in what we watch, sanctions don't necessarily work. They don't stop it, because there's always some country that for the right price will try to get them what it is that they need. I think the problem that we've got is that we have, this is not an easy subject, because you have the leaders of two countries, one who is young and inexperienced and probably volatile, and the second one who's crazy. I'm not so sure there's a big difference between the two when it comes to that. We need a military presence in the area. I think we definitely got to sit down and have a talk with China. China's got a friend and enemy at the same time. They're an interesting country for us. We do a lot of work with them, but at the same time, they have spies that try to steal information from us. And I'm not sure that we can really count on them. But if it comes down to it, where if Iran or North Korea, if it comes down to it where they are at a point where they become nuclear capable of the ability to either attack Israel or North Korea, in their case Japan or South Korea, I'm not so sure you have a choice. If a man lives across the street from you and he's building a gun and he keeps telling you that he's going to shoot you as soon as he gets that gun built, do you wait for him to finish the gun? I'm not so sure that that's an intelligent move.
Yeah, the question, should we invade? Gosh, I've just fought 2 wars, 2.5 if you count Libya, for 10 years. I'm the last guy that wants to invade anybody. However, I'm the first guy to raise my hand and go if we need to. 21st century. Somebody somewhere in this world that doesn't like us is going to get a nuclear weapon at some time. With the technology growing, if they don't figure out how to do it by themselves, they'll buy it from somebody. With Pakistan scientists selling the technology to other places, it's going to happen. We have to be ready for that. It goes back to that original question I was just asked. A 21st century solution is not to just invade every country we don't like what they're doing. Not the right way to go about it, and very impractical. And in this tactical environment of, well, if you're going to do this to me, Israel went and bombed an Iraqi nuclear site in 1983. That worked back then. Now Iran is building all their bunkers down low, and it's very difficult to bomb them and to solve the problem. We'd have to take over that large country, Iran, to stop it. We have to have ways to prevent their missiles from hitting us or hitting our allies. And that's missile defense, 21st century technology. We just gave up on the SIM-47 with a big laser. Sounds like Star Wars, sounds like science fiction. But a big laser that would shoot these missiles down, an airborne laser flying around. Geez, when I read about that, I thought, oh, thank God, that'd be really good. But we gave up on it. You know, this missile defense that we're talking about. These anti-missile missiles, shooting things down, Patriot missile batteries. That is a 21st century solution for these rogue nations, these terrorist entities, these possibilities that we're going to face. I never want to see a nuclear bomb go off in America or in one of our countries. But to try to invade to stop it, that's smashing a little acorn with a huge mallet, when we can do it a lot smarter, a lot safer, and wiser by matching the technologies over here, and a lot better. So missile defense is the answer for these type of threats in the future. Thank you.
Someone asked me when I first decided to run what was going to be the most difficult decision I thought I would have to make as a member of Congress. And that decision would be sending one of our children, one of our wonderful men and women, to war, to possibly come home wounded or not come home at all. My grandfather was a veteran of World War II. He was actually kept on the march for the last several weeks of that war. My dad is a veteran of Vietnam. I've grown up with a very strong sense of service and how important it is. But at the same time, we have to protect our country. Now, I can't sit here today and make the judgment call, should we, or should we tomorrow, or should we 30 seconds before we think that gun's going to be built, invade. But I can tell you, I would put all of my resources into making the best and most informed decision possible prior to sending your sons and daughters, my son or daughter, into a situation where they could possibly lose their life. But we cannot take these threats lightly. Sanctions need to be firm, they need to be enforced, and they need to actually do some damage once they are put into place. And we need to continue to make those hard choices and not just make the threats, but follow through. We have to protect our allies and we have to protect our borders. And unfortunately, that comes at a cost to this country.
Okay. We have another one here that can easily be given to all four of you, and it says, our president and his Democrat colleagues are touting the buffet rule to solve our financial problems. The buffet rule increases taxes on the wealthy.
Warren Buffett.
Beg your pardon?
Warren Buffett. The Buffett rule.
Oh, the buffet. Wow, looks like a buffet. We call it something.
That was with the Las Vegas image.
Thank you. That's good old work. The Heritage Foundation has estimated that the increase in tax receipts will amount to approximately $45 billion. However, the president's budget runs trillions of dollars in deficit every year. So, how is increasing taxes on the wealthy going to solve our problem? I guess what they'd like here is, what's your solution? Answer that. How's it going to solve our problems? How are you going to solve our problems? So we can start with John.
I had the last one. Why don't we start at the other end or rotate it?
Would you rather
Let
come
me
back
have
and
you start.
start? Because.
Dr. Tim, Dr. Tim, I'll take it. I'll take
That's
it.
good.
Yeah, we're okay, that's only
Go
fair.
ahead.
That's only fair.
It's fine.
I heard a good explanation the other day from someone that sits down and works numbers. And they said that the increase of $40 to $45 billion in taxes would be adjusted if, basically, when you start figuring it versus our money that we spend. It would be the same as if you have a guy who makes $2,400 a month, but he spends $3,700 every month. The increase in tax gives him an extra $40. It doesn't really solve the problem. That's the first issue. The second issue, and I think one that we really need to keep track of here, when we start adding tax to some of these really wealthy individuals or wealthy folks that own corporations or own businesses, the vast majority of people that are going to get hit with this tax are not the ultra wealthy. They are the people who actually own small businesses, and they'll be taxed as individuals. It's not a real benefit. You know, they're the ones who are going to be paying, and that money that they're paying in taxes is money that they could use to hire, you know, another employee. And the other problem is, when you deal, since most of the businesses are going to be the ones that are getting hit, you have to remember, a business can't operate for very long if they're losing money. So if the business is losing money, what do you think they're going to do to the price of the product? They're going to raise it. Who buys the product? There's more of the middle and lower class than there are of the upper class. So the vast majority of the product is going to be bought by the middle and lower class. Who's really paying that tax increase? It isn't the upper level at all. It's the middle and lower class, once again, are going to be hit with the tax.
Sure. The Warren Buffett rule plays on something that's happening in this country that I detest, and that's class warfare. In America, the American dream is to go from somebody like me, growing up on welfare, to somebody like Warren Buffett. I got ways to go to get there, but I've come a long way. And this idea of, you know, we need to soak the rich to pay for irresponsible government is just the wrong way to go about it. So premise-wise, I kind of don't like the idea of this class warfare and saying we need to take more from those rich folks to make sure that we're taking care of spending in government. Our government spends too much money. We don't need to raise taxes to pay for irresponsible government. Now, again, the Warren Buffett rule is comparing apples and oranges. Capital gains tax is one of those flat taxes in the country. The more you make in capital gains, the more you pay in capital gains tax. That's a progressive tax. Now, income tax, on the other side, is a progressive tax. The more you make, the higher percentage of your income you pay. Back to some numbers. Remember, I got a degree in math. I like numbers. The top 1% in this country pays 37% of the taxes, income taxes. The top 25% wage earners in this country pay 85% of the income taxes. How much more is fair? I do understand what Warren Buffett is trying to say, is that why is it okay for millionaires to not pay as much percentage-wise as those that aren't making $1 million bucks? I certainly understand that. The rich in this country, the ones that make more, should pay more in taxes, but do it in a graduated way. One of the ways I think we should go forward on some of this stuff, one of the reasons why the rich don't pay as much taxes is because we have a 20,000 plus page tax code with a lot of loopholes and incentives that they take advantage of, paid for by lobbyists. Let's get rid of some of those and make the tax code more fair for everybody by getting rid of that stuff. That's how I would go forward as your congressman.
$45 billion. We have over a $16 trillion national deficit. For every dollar we spend in this country, we're borrowing 41 cents, if not more today. This is not going to address the issue of taxing and spending. We have corporate loopholes on taxes that need to be addressed first. We cannot tax the builders and the producers of this country. In the last 2 years, we've slipped from being number 1 in manufacturing in the United States to number 2. We are no longer number 1 in manufacturing in the world. We're number 2. That should concern all of us. Taxing the rich is not going to bring the dollar amounts that this government wants to collect to grow the government larger. to where we need to be. We can't continue to tax additional just to grow government larger. That issue has to be addressed. And I would love, as I'm sure many of you would, to be in that 1% bracket. I'd be happy to pay the percentage of tax I have to pay if I was in that 1% bracket. But I'm in that next bracket, or probably a bracket or two below that, frankly. And I know that we have to all pay our share. But as someone said, I think as Eugene said earlier, with rising tides, all ships rise. It's not our job to pull the highest wage earners down. It's our job to bring the middle class and the lower earners up.
National tax policy in 2 minutes. See how far we can go. GE 2 years ago paid no taxes, paid almost no taxes last year, and probably won't pay any taxes this next year. ExxonMobil, no taxes 2 years ago, less than, I think just a little over $10 billion, $10 million in taxes in this last year. Romney, 21 million, pays 13% tax. Something's terribly wrong. There's a terribly wrong system here in which there is class warfare, and I'll tell you, the middle class is losing the war. Take a look at all the economic statistics. The middle class has seen no growth, actually seen a decline in the numbers, and also seen a decline in their wealth. The top 2 to 5% have seen enormous growth. Everybody knows that the corporate executive 40 years ago made 40 times more than the line worker. Today they're making 300 or 400 times more. Something's terribly wrong here. We need to adjust our tax policy. The Buffett rule is very clear. It simply pushes aside all the deductions and said, whatever your income is, you're going to pay 30%. Now the tax rate happens to be 35% today, with all the deductions. So is that fair? I think it would be fair. We ought not increase the taxes on the middle class, and in fact, we've made major efforts to reduce taxes on the middle class. We've done it in several ways. The payroll tax reduction is in place today because of my vote and the vote of my colleagues. We reduced taxes on businesses, and we increased taxes on corporations that would offshore jobs. They previously got $12 billion a year in tax reduction for every job they offshore. We're in the process of trying to right this problem, but we've got a long, long way to go. And when we get a proposal, as we did this last week, 2 weeks ago, to reduce the taxes on the top income, those who earn more than $1 million a year, by $394,000, something is terribly, terribly wrong. That bill passed the House of Representatives.
Okay. No, we're not going to do any more written ones, although we have about half a dozen or more here, so if we run out of oral questions, we can come back to them, but we will start oral question portion of the program. To the audience, we invite you to come up to the microphone over there on your far left, give your name, and then ask your question. Please don't editorialize. Simply ask your question, refrain from any personal or extraneous remark. Okay, Pam, we'll line up. While she's walking over here, I really think that the buffet rule sounds a lot better.
All you can eat.
I missed dinner, so I don't want to pay for it.
Now, this is a question for all of you, and this deals with something that we've heard by the way I'm Kate Phelps-Kaler, and I live here in Dixon. Lately, many candidates all over the country have talked a lot about the so-called family values of birth control, marriage, and school vouchers. What role do you believe the federal government has in these topics? Thank you.
Could you go those three again, please? So I can write them down.
Birth control, marriage, and school vouchers.
That's all over the place. I'll go first. First of all, Kay, Dixon Citizen of the Year. Right I believe our congressman gave her that award. If I remember correctly. It's great. family values. You know, I started out by saying I'm a family man. I'm in this for my kids. There's a lot involved in that. The family is the basic unit to society. And strong families make a strong society, a strong country. We have to strengthen our families, support our families, encourage them. You went through 3 different issues there. First of all, birth control. And if it's any relation to the Rick Santorum, President Obama birth control issues, let me just say birth control is a 21st century way of family planning. Birth control in terms of prior to being pregnant birth control is the way I'll talk about that one. And when you talk about welfare reform, something that I would offer freely to our welfare recipients is birth control, so they don't have more children while they're on welfare to be burdens on the taxpayer society. Okay, on birth control. When you talk about marriage, something very important to me, being married to my wife for 23 years next month, did I say that? Again, it has to be encouraged. It's an issue that we talk about in California with Prop 8, which I supported. But I tell you, that is one of those issues that's very difficult. I have gay and lesbian friends. I have them working on my campaign. We see differently on that issue in some cases, but I'm willing to leave it in the state's purview, because when my wife and I were married, it was said that by the power invested in me by the state of California, I pronounce you man and wife. I'll leave it there. And then the third one was school vouchers. Holy cow, I'm so for it. Okay, we homeschool our kids because our public school system in California, 46th, 47th, is not good enough for my kids nor yours. It needs to be a whole lot better. At the federal level, we need to push K through 12 down to the states, take it out of the federal level purview, repeal No Child Left Behind, and give it to the states. Let them do better at more of a local level. Thank you.
The role of federal government in birth control, marriage, and school vouchers. Birth control is an individual choice. It should be left up to the family or the person who's utilizing it. Marriage, in my opinion, is a states' rights issue. I support civil unions, but I value my right to be married to my husband above all things. School vouchers, I support. I believe we need to extremely rework the Department of Education at the federal level and bring it back down to a local and state level. Not every person is meant or wants to go to an academic 4- or +year education. We need to start including more vocational opportunities. And we as individuals need to be able to choose the best path for our children and ourselves. And that's bringing it back down more into the local level and to the hands of the states. I think the broad brush strokes from the feds convolutes the issue and brings us into a place where we are not really serving the educational needs of our children.
There appears to be a national effort to use government to deny women the opportunity to have birth control. That's wrong and should not occur. With regard to marriage, the government ought not tell anybody who to marry or who not to marry. With regard to the voucher system, that's really a state issue. The federal government is not involved in the voucher system. The federal government does provide support for those low-income schools, for those kids that are handicapped in any number of ways. And the federal government does provide a lot of school lunch programs, a lot of the school lunch programs around the nation. All of those are very, very important roles. With regard to the vouchers, it's not going to solve the problem. It probably will create far more problems because it will divide the community into those that are using the vouchers from the private school sector and those who do not have the opportunity to get there. Where vouchers have been in place, they've not worked particularly well. So we've got a real serious problem. I'm going to go back to the very first place I started this discussion, which is the discussion about those things that are critically important. Education being the first and foremost. The fact of the matter is that we're starving education. As a society here in California, we're giving up on education. We're not supporting education. In 1990, the state of California supported students at the University of California $15,000 per student. Today, it's just under $9,000 per student, constant dollars. It's an example of the way in which this state, and in the larger context, the United States, has backed away from the most important job-creating thing we can do, which is to educate the workforce. Vocational education, absolutely important. It's disappeared. Why? Because we don't support it with money. There's not sufficient money in the classrooms to do it. Change is critical. You have to be willing to change the system. Unfortunately, vouchers will not lead to the kind of changes that we need. It will probably lead to a series of other problems.
Interesting. I have heard no one nationally or even locally, Democrat, Independent, or Republican, say that they wish to deny a woman the right to have birth control. The only thing I've ever heard somebody say was, it's a choice if you wish to do it, that's fine, it doesn't bother me, but I don't need to pay for it. It's your choice. Going to the gym is a healthy thing too, but I'm not going to pay for your gym membership. Now, there are some women that birth control helps with certain health issues. That's a different situation. School vouchers. School vouchers have proven to be extremely successful. There are a number of schools around the country that are producing at a much lower rate than the cost for public school. Their test scores are much higher. And they used to say, well, that's because you're getting the cream of the crop. You're just getting the kids that the parents are willing to get involved and help out. You're not getting the urban kids. But in New York and Washington, D.C., I believe, I watched a special on, it might have been San Francisco or Oakland, watching inner city schools set up off a voucher system. These kids come flat out of the urban ghetto. And these kids are tearing it up in school. And they're doing it for less money than the public school system costs. And they're paying their teachers more money. Marriage. I do not have a problem. I believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman. But I do not have a problem with civil union. Again, like Rick said, I have some friends. I have one friend of mine who is gay, atheist, and Democrat. And we argue over everything. But at the end of the day, we shake hands and laugh and go home and ride a barbecue and invite them because I like it. We've got a great sense of humor. Marriage, you've got situations like, for example, with the Trayvon murder case. This is terrible. But in Chicago, during that same week, 50 people were shot and 10 died. All black youth, black on black crime. There's a 70% out of wedlock birth rate in the inner city in blacks. There's no dad to figure out where this kid's going, who's running around with. There's no dad keeping track of the girls when the 25-year-old guy comes to date the 14-year-old girl. That's the problem. There's no father in the household.
Next question.
This is for all of you. Earmarks have gotten a bad name. They've fallen out of favor as a congressional tool. What techniques would you use to bring home the bacon? Or that is, how would you bring tax dollars back to your district?
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I think a lot of infrastructure items have been classified as earmarks, and I don't believe that to be the case. The transportation system. You go to the gas pump, you fill up your car, you pay the taxes. Those taxes go to the feds. They're meant to come back down to the state and the local transportation authorities that hire the contractors and issue the contracts to work on our interstate and our local highways. So I do not believe that infrastructure projects such as levee repair, bridge repair, are constituted as poor. We've gotten to a place where the structure of the commitments from the federal government to the local municipalities, and with my county supervisor hat on, I actually have very strong feelings about this. We have commitments from the federal government, such as secure rural schools, and fundings that were made, and commitment fundings that were made so that local government can operate. That's not pork. Our highway system, our infrastructure system, our water system, those are not pork items. The infrastructure in this state and in this country needs to be improved. We have some highways in this district, I'll focus on 12, that need to be addressed immediately. So bringing home the bacon, so to speak, for transportation projects, in my book, is not pork.
Yeah, earmarks. You know, one of the way politicians buy votes, as your congressman, you'll be sending your tax dollars. I brought this up last night in my opening remarks. I did my taxes 2 days ago, and I'm going to have to write a check this year. That's real money. that I've got to send to my congressman, I expect him or her to spend that money wisely, to do it in a way that's responsible. When we talk about earmarks, like one of the ones that went to Iowa to study pig odor, no kidding, that's pork, okay? Earmarks need to see the light of day. They need to be debated. And earmarks at the federal budget level need to have a federal priority for service to the district. One of the things that I talk about, and this is good, about the water issue, to help solve the water issue. You know, being a leader is taking positions, offering solutions, and then defending them, taking risks. As we talk about the California water supply crisis, one of the solutions I'm offering, which I will be beat up on all day by a lot of people, but I'm offering it, is we need to build the Auburn Dam. We need to put all that water that we collect, or could be collecting every winter, behind that dam for increased supply, for our delta, for our drinking water, for our agricultural industry. We need to solve that problem for everybody, not sacrifice one or two or three of them. We need to do that. Now that's an earmark, if you will, that I would like to get federal dollars for to help build. But it's going to help everybody in America, because the California agricultural industry serves everybody in America. That's something as a congressman I could defend, put out there at the light of day, and debate on the House floor, and expect to win. Pig odor studies, not so much.
President Obama, when he ran, said he was going to put an end to earmarks. And in his stimulus, his first major bill, it contained over 5,000 earmarks into the millions. Earmarks have become primarily used, in some cases, not at all, but in some cases, as political favors or rewards for your supporters or campaign donors. There's no question that we need to take a look at it to get it back on track to whatever it's supposed to be. The issue that I have with wiping them out, since I've not researched that, is that the founding fathers, and I would need to find out when earmarks came in to play. If they came in from the beginning, I'd have to take a real serious look to see what was their intent in the beginning, and is there a way to clean it up a little bit? Because the structure that they put in place with our Constitution and our political process has created the greatest nation in the history of the world. So before I dump it, I'd certainly like to see a whole lot more about what the original intent was, so I understand it to a better degree. As far as fighting for your district, I always find that I tend to be a positive person by nature, but I am a realist as well. And so I try to find, where can I find the thing that makes the most sense, that's going to give me the most positive result to get behind. So if there are things that we can do, and people are going to always be sending stuff from your district, things that you can do that will benefit not only your district, but maybe surrounding areas, things that are important, those are the things that you go to bat on, because then not only are you looking for dollars for those, but they're a benefit that makes sense.
In my first year in Congress, the earmarks did exist. We went through a process asking communities, this community and the other communities I represented, what's important to you? City councils will remember that I did that. They sent us the information. We then prioritized, and all of it was public. Who requested the money, what county, what city, what organization, it was all on the website. The new Congress came in and said no earmarks. So how do we bring home the necessary programs? For example, this community needs some rail crossings. Down in Fairfield and Vacaville, they need to build a train station. The airport, the Air Force Base needs a new facility. All of these things are there, so how do we make this work? Well, there's two ways to make it work. One just happened on the floor of the House about 2 years ago. And what happened there was an earmark came to the floor, and the debate erupted, and it was deemed by the majority to not be an earmark. Okay, so an earmark's no longer an earmark. That's one way to do it. The other way is more straightforward and has been used, it has to be used now. And that is, in the appropriation process, certain categories of appropriation are put in place. For example, transportation. I'm going to go back to the 5 things I talked about here. Education. It's crucial that we understand how we can change the education system. So we need to put into the education budget the kinds of research, how to use modern technology in the educational process. in infrastructure. Absolutely crucial that we have infrastructure available to us. So we need to put into the transportation bill the categories that deal with floods, dams, water projects, transportation projects, and the rest. If we're going to deal with national defense, we need to understand that the research that's going on at the laboratories is crucial for the earlier issue we talked about in nuclear weapons. How do we deal with nuclear weapons? What do we do about bringing them up to date and making sure that they're safe, secure, and reliable? These are all issues that require federal expenditures. Under the present rules that have been put upon us by the current majority, we can't do it directly. So we are now in the process of appropriating in Collins, and then we do what are called administrative earmarks.
Next question. Yes.
Hi. I have a question on where each candidate stands on Agenda 21 and ICLID. And the way I understand both of those issues, they take away American freedoms, our rights to property, except there's a water year points on that, and do you stand for Agenda 21 and ICLID? If you don't know about them, I'm really disappointed in my congressman because that's affecting everybody in America, all across America. So that's my question. Do you support it or do you stand against it?
I'm sorry, I didn't, when you started your question, I didn't hear it, what you said at the outset.
Do you stand for Agenda 21 and ICLID, which is, in most people's, common people's perspective,
Amendment 21?
Agenda 21 and ICLID. They really have an effect on people who are now informed of what's going on in our country and the war, move to socialism and less personal rights and property rights. This is something that has been signed on not just by this current administration, but others. But right now, it seems like you guys are going more forward with it than the last administrations are doing. So that's my question. If you're not informed about it, I'm really disappointed.
There is no Agenda 21 in the current Congress or in the current administration.
It's called the UN Agenda 21. We signed on to support it. It's being used in this train station right down here, ABAG and everything else. We have a train station being built 5 miles from another train station.
This is,
We're supposed to debate this
hold on for a
with you.
second, just to let you know, it's not to be a conversation back and forth between one person who asks the question, and then you answer it. If you don't answer it to their satisfaction, that's too bad.
And it's too bad, I still have time. If the UN Agenda 21 is not the administration's agenda, nor is it the Congress's agenda. That's the answer.
I apologize, Les, to disappoint you, but I don't know what they are. The only thing I do know is that there is no way that I will approve the UN to have any authoritative position or final say on anything on the United States. The UN, half of their committees are headed by the worst offenders in the world of that issue. In women's rights, the countries that are on that committee are the worst offenders in the world. Now, America has done more in 300 years than all the nations and all the civilizations in history combined. There is no way that we should put anybody else in charge. They don't know how to run this country. And we're busy fighting with each other trying to do it half the time, but they definitely don't know how. And if they get any position where they can make a final statement or a final answer or have any control over us, it's not going to be for our benefit. So I apologize again, but that's the bottom line. The UN does not get a final say on anything. Eugene?
I'll talk on that a little bit. You know, this Agenda 21 thing has really come up lately because of a lot of the things that environmentalists or certain CARB and different agencies are trying to push on us. It's very simple to go to figure out how to solve these problems. I mean, we've had city planning in this country way back to Thomas Jefferson. I fly airplanes for a living. I'm flying over these squares over the country all the time. Thank Thomas Jefferson for all those squares, trying to make the growing of our country make sense. Now, Agenda 21 comes in And again, it comes from that UN way back in early 1992, 93, under the first Bush administration, and then on from there. And it seems to be taking away our property rights in favor of some global design for America. That's why it's important who you elect at every level, from your school boards through president. We got to make sure we're electing people that are putting America's interests first and who understand the Constitution and the role of property rights. If we understand property rights and we defend them under the Constitution, Agenda 21 will not be an issue in the growth and the planning for that growth of America. Thanks.
International interests should never dictate local land use policy. It should never dictate private property rights. The community of Dixon is very familiar with land use issues over the past 6, 7 years. You've had quite a number of interesting projects come your way. No foreign interest should be able to weigh in on your city council or your board of supervisors' ability to make findings, to approve or deny those projects. No international interest should force upon local jurisdictions a project that is neither economically viable or needed for your community. We need to put our local communities first and do what's best for our citizens and not have the interest of internationalism trump that.
Next question. You're up.
The budget deficit is a major problem here in the United States of America. And the Simpson-Bowles Commission called for a balanced approach, which means tax increases and cuts in entitlements. The President has called for a balanced approach. The Republicans in the House have called for a cuts-only approach. And if I'm not mistaken, the Ryan budget, cuts-only, has passed in the House. My question is to the people on the panel. Do they support the cuts